your position. I say again, Croft is coming to you.
Jesus Christ.
Shh. We'll get her, sir.
Show me her corpse, and your entire team is next in line for Deacon training. Rourke out.
You heard the man. Let's do this.
Since 2013's Tomb Raider reboot, Lara Croft has been trying to find herself and her role in the world, thrust into a real ordeal in the first game before chasing after her father's legacy and butting up against Trinity in the second. Not much has changed between Rise and Shadow of the Tomb Raider's opening. If anything, she's now even more obsessed in her pursuit of Trinity, doing anything that she can to get one step ahead. It's this fanaticism that sees her inadvertently setting into motion a cataclysmic chain of events. Amidst all of the familiar traversal, exploration and combat, the centerpiece of this new adventure is Paititi, where, instead of uncovering a long-lost city of dead, Lara stumbles into a bustling, vibrant civilization right in the heart of the Peruvian jungles that has remained almost untouched by the outer world. It's a big city that is easy to get lost in, stacked with the secret boxes and collectible bits of loot that you can find throughout the game, but there's also tons of people to talk to, llamas to pet, merchants to barter with, and branches to follow off into the nearby jungles and temples. It's not the only hub in the game, but it is by far and away the most impressive and the one where you will spend the most time. As before, the challenge tombs aren't really part of the main story path that you follow through each of these areas, but are instead tucked away into hidden corners for you to find and explore. They are well worth making the detour for in this game, with the traversal to actually reach them being a big part of the challenge, and some really nifty environmental puzzles to take on once you get there. They go deeper, they're darker and creepier, and they can delve into the nuances of particular gameplay ideas really quite effectively. Getting through the world in general is just a joy as it pushes the limits of believability. Lara's movements will be instantly familiar from the previous two games, but they're now quite notably augmented by a new rappelling wire, which lets her seamlessly switch from clambering around on the soft rock to sliding down to pendulum across walls, swing towards a ledge, or simply descend into the abyss. There's a really artful blend between these different traversal techniques at different points, bringing together certain combinations in interesting and challenging ways that add a real thrill to the action. This game symbolically emphasises descent and darkness through its environments, from the shade that you get when adventuring through the jungle to the near pitch blackness of certain crypts and passageways. It's a great looking game, but I do wish that Lara's flashlight was on a bit more often, or perhaps a manual toggle for the player, to really help with those puddles of absolute darkness that I sometimes struggled with. There's also more swimming sections with improved controls that make getting from one pocket of air to the next easier, but you will have to brace yourself for some underwater stealth sections as you hide in weeds to avoid some particularly angry eels and schools of terribly hungry piranhas. The story in this game weaves together and wraps up some of the narrative strands from the previous two games, most importantly the threat that Trinity continues to pose to the world, and the role that Lara's father had through his own treasure hunting escapades. Paititi helps to throw this into a different light though, because there's now many more lives at stake than just the core and guest cast of characters. There's also some real strain in her and Jonah's friendship at some point, as her single-minded pursuit of Trinity puts others at risk. But it feels like the lessons that Lara learns along the way are only really skin deep when it comes to actually playing the game. There's still a disconnect for me between her character growth and the brutality of the combat on show, but it's not too deep a criticism when it can be levelled at many of Tomb Raider's peers just as easily. Combat for me is another area that has been really well expanded upon in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, with the ability now to break from combat and revert to stealth, and this helps to emphasise the fragility of Lara in a gunfight. Sure, you can still hunker down behind cover and play the game like a traditional third-person shooter in a lot of cases, but the fearful reactions of the Trinity soldiers are much more justified when you're striking from the bushes, leaping from the trees, covering yourself in mud predator style and hiding amongst the muddy tree roots. Breaking line of sight after you've been discovered lets you shift from going loud to stealth and then going back again, making use of all of the extended combat techniques that Lara has. Honestly though, Lara is just vicious in this game, and I've said this on a few occasions in the past. She's been brutal ever since the 2013 reboot. The stealth kill animations, many of which are returning from the previous games, they are still as visceral as mainstream video games can get. Enemies get strung up in trees now. There's the brutality of hitting someone with Lara's climbing axes, or stabbing someone with her knife. And the story takes Lara to some really dark places, both figuratively and literally. It feels like she really reaches her lowest, most vengeful point in a particularly action-packed stretch of the game, before coming back to a form of redemption and closure through the final act. Although, as I've said before, I don't really think that comes through in the way that the action of the game plays out. Oddly, some of her newest tricks are only unlocked quite deep into the game's story, or they come as rewards for completing challenge tombs, or are tucked away in the sprawling new skill tree that gives you so many options within its 3 branches. Hallucinogenic arrows are the main odd one out here, and it's strange for them to hold them back for such a long time in the story given how they were so regularly demoed prior to release. This in turn makes them feel much more useful for a New Game Plus run-through. You also need to go out of your way to unlock some of the new clothing that Lara could wear. You have new vestiges that can be restored into new tops and bottoms to wear, some of which lend Lara some really quite neat perks when it comes to hunting, combat, traversal and so on. Perhaps one of the best things about Shadow of the Tomb Raider is your ability to truly customize your play experience. Of course, you're going on the exact same journey as any other player out there, but as you start a new game, you can independently set the combat, traversal and puzzle difficulty, letting you amp up one area of the game and reduce the others to your tastes. Personally, I settled on having the traversal and the puzzle difficulty higher, meaning that I had less time to react to a loss of grip and had to deal with not having white lines marks on every ledge. 95% of the time the path ahead for you is still pretty obvious, but there were a few moments of me staring at the scenery, searching for a ledge or jump to make, and yeah, every once in a while I would jump off into the abyss and just end up with Lara just impaled on some spikes or cracking her head on some rocks. Further to this, you have got quite a few accessibility options, which most notably let you turn off the rapid button presses for certain actions and make crank-turning directional pushes of the analog stick instead of spinning the stick around in circles. As soon as I found these options, I turned off the tiresome button mashing that I've got so bored of about 4 or 5 years ago. Another neat twist is being able to switch the dialogue in the game from being English across the board to featuring the native tongues and languages, albeit with everybody magically being able to understand each other and totally not suspecting a thing when a white English woman is wandering around and speaking a completely different language to you.
Uchu? Really? What happened?
It's called immersion mode, and it does work when you're just wandering around the marketplace to just feel like this is a completely foreign land, but I feel it quite ironically breaks the immersion at a few key points where Lara is meant to be masquerading as someone else. In fact, my main problem with Paititi is that the interactions with its many citizens aren't particularly consistent in quality, and that's not just from the NPC side of things. Camilla Luddington's voice acting has got its high points in amping up the stress and drama of certain situations, but when talking to NPCs, Lara often sounds detached and overly sad or morose. Some of my favourite interactions in the game are with the children of Paititi, where Lara actually sounds a little playful and jocular, and it just makes it even more disappointing that there is this levity of tone at certain points of the game, and the direction hasn't been there to add it in other parts where it would have fitted in nicely. Really, Shadow of the Tomb Raider builds on the foundations of Rise of the Tomb Raider, although there's much more depth to the actual tomb raiding, more flexibility in the combat, and the city of Paititi is a hub that you can easily get lost in as you explore it and the surrounding jungles. So, while Shadow of the Tomb Raider's story might lack some of the meaning and the impact that it sets out to have, this is still another action-packed romp for fans of the series, and it comes easily recommended if you have enjoyed the last 2 games. Thanks as ever for checking out our video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and found it informative about Lara's latest adventure. You can head over to thesixthaxis.com to catch this review in written form, but before you go, please do like, subscribe and share this video with others. Hopefully we will see you again soon. Goodbye!